Welcome to Until All of Us Are Free, a year-long multimedia education project dedicated to Black liberation as collective liberation. I am your host and creator of this project, Ijoma Olubo. In this episode, we have part 2 of my conversation with Majd around Palestine and anti-Blackness. In this part of our conversation, Majd and I are discussing Black and Palestinian identity and solidarity, especially in light of the most recent election. And Majd is talking about the differences she has witnessed as an Afro-Palestinian woman who was born and raised in Palestine and has now lived in the U.S. for some years. She's talking about some of the differences she's noticed in how Palestinian Americans and Black Americans have been relating to each other, especially in the midst of this most recent phase of the genocide in Palestine.
I have noticed a tremendous change. There's been so many influencers and writers and poets and Palestinian in particular that have used their platform to raise awareness, and it's been beautiful, and I've loved following them, and it's been truly incredible. But I've also noticed their evolution, because it started with kind of hot and heavy, we are unapologetically Palestinian, and I love that. But what they failed at the very beginning is to lock arms and think of collective liberation, think of Palestinian liberation as collective liberation. There was a lot of centering, which makes sense. In a lot of ways, it was their first time really kind of saying, I'm Palestinian, I'm unapologetic, I want to raise awareness, and that is so needed. But it also was needed at the same time saying, without collective liberation for us all, we can't be free. Right. And I think there was a lot of frustration from Palestinian community, particularly some big personalities, surprised that Black and Brown communities did not come in with the same energy. And in my head, I kept thinking, where were you in 2020, for example? Mm-hmm. Or where were you in 2014, 2015, 2016, at every protest for Black young men or women that were killed? Were you there? And if so, if you weren't, then you don't get to say that, because it's a collective liberation. We're all in it together. And I've seen them shift and pivot into understanding the Black struggle and an understanding, oh, wait, this is like the systematic piece. And so it was really interesting to see the evolution and how they started using the collective liberation language, but also understanding that even if Black folks did not show up, there's survival going on here too. It is not for a lack of care. It's the system and the environment in which Black and Brown people live here is it's horrendous. They're focused on their own survival. And when Black authors and activists and poets and all that show up with the same energy, I'm so proud and feel whole. But also, I don't ever blame, why aren't they showing up in the same way? I blame white folks because they're living the ultimate free, carefree, racism-free, all the things free life. And they're not using their platform to do better. And they're not using their voice to raise awareness. That's who I hold accountable.
That's beautiful. And it's true. And it's been interesting and heartbreaking to watch, especially around this election, Black Americans and Palestinian Americans in particular, because I'm not seeing this coming from Palestine, right? Palestinians just are trying to survive. I am not seeing Palestinians in Palestine being like, why aren't Black Americans coming out stronger for us? What I am seeing are Palestinian Americans feeling, of course, isolated. We're both extreme minority populations. Also, Black people felt very similarly. Black people felt very much like, why aren't we talking about risks around this election? Why aren't we talking about what this means? And I think not having those networks of communication, this being a new stage of solidarity. Solidarity, of course, has existed between Black and Palestinian populations for a long time. But I think there's a difference between solidarity on an elite level and solidarity on an everyday level, because people can get activated by a situation, but it doesn't mean they're radicalized. And it doesn't mean that they understand all of the systems and the connections in the systems, which is what I'm trying to build this whole project around. But it also means that when you're still forming it and it's still tenuous and it's still tender, I look and I see so many Black women in particular who feel very hurt and betrayed around the election. And then Palestinian Americans who feel even more isolated than they did before and even more alone. And for me, As someone who spends their lives fighting systemic oppression, what I see is immense lost opportunity. No one was winning the election. We were all going to lose this election, no matter who was in office. But we had a chance to come together and say, we will not be held hostage. We will not be played against each other. And we couldn't do it because the groundwork hadn't been laid for that. We didn't suddenly have this systemic education. And so I'm hoping for that. I'm hoping that even as we talk about this, and we have to heal a lot, we do have to heal the impacts of anti-Blackness, the impacts of Islamophobia, the impacts of anti-Arab sentiment, and also as a country address how thorough the propaganda machine against Arab peoples and Palestinians is. Even for me, as someone who grew up with Palestinians, I am still deconstructing things I just took for granted in middle school, elementary school, that I was taught in school about Palestinians, about, the quote unquote peace process, about all of the intifadas. Like,
Right.
just now going, wow, this was the most in-depth, thorough job of indoctrination with no counter. There hasn't been any effort in our school systems and our public systems to say, even now, even today, there isn't that, hey, let's deconstruct all of these TV shows that built their entire structure off of making you afraid of Arab people. Let's deconstruct all of these discussions and like how we talked about Camp David and all of these things. None of that has been done. Black Americans were so used to facing anti-Blackness and how heartbreaking that is from other populations of color, especially, that we can center that and focus on that and say that has to be healed. But I think we also haven't investigated how much we have participated in anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, and anti-Palestinian sentiment as well.
It's been really sad. The election it was really tough to live through that. I felt like we were up against the world, particularly among our own people, like Black and Brown communities. And it to me, honestly, there's two things. One is it's really sad that we were pinned against each other. People are like, well, we're going to go back to Starbucks and we're going to not do all the things that you told us not to do because you didn't stand with us. We can't just follow whatever these two options. Like we can't. Like we have to criticize. We have to really kind of push and hope for change because we can't be a two-party system. But at the same time, I also felt really sad for my fellow Black American women.
It was a heartbreaking thing. And I feel like it's more a product of what it feels like to be beaten down over and over and over and over again. And I think that also is where we have to have real conversations about what representation really looks like and what it means to ask for more. And also being honest about who gets to run for president, who gets to be in that position, because you don't get to be on that ticket and have really any radical views. You don't get to actually represent a community. And I think we have to be honest about that because we have to stop pitting our hopes on the system. I hope that we recognize that. I hope we can, because I think there's going to be opportunities in this struggle over and over again for Black Americans and for Palestinian Americans to buy into this system and sell each other out over and over and over and over. And I hope that we can build not only strong enough connections, but build strong enough education around how this system works that we stop falling for it. I've seen how often non-Black people of color here are offered proximity to whiteness if they just turn against us. And I've seen how often Black people are told, your issue is only your issue and no one else's, to stop them from recognizing other impacted communities or even being intersectional within our own communities. We're offered up capitalism, we're offered up wealth. Look at Trump always offers up wealth. Even looking at what Harris offered up, right, for Black men was cryptocurrency and small business loans. It's always this, you can buy into white wealth and then it won't matter. The idea is you won't be subject to this. And we are always going to be. And so I'm hoping we can take lessons from this and say, actually, a system built off of our exploitation will never make room for us.
Right.
It won't work. We were meant to be excluded. We were meant to be harmed. And it takes some of us longer to figure it out than others because we're also meant to be in a hierarchy and we're meant to stay in our space, but we're all hurt.
I'm so proud of being Palestinian. I'm so proud of being Afro-Palestinian. As horrendous as this year has been, both of my identities have come in in a beautiful way together this year. And both of my peoples have been standing by each other. And that part has made the most difficult year of my life so much better. It's been an incredible experience seeing truly collective care and collective liberation in our friend group and in our community.
It's beautiful. I think about all the time how grateful I am. It's so weird, but we have to recognize these things. Otherwise, it crushes us. The despair of everything crushes us, and we don't recognize all of the moments of beautiful humanity in it.
It's been so isolating. It's been also crazy making. It felt like we're being gaslit all the time. And to find each other, and sometimes you would say something, or Maher would say something, or Nikita would say something. I'm like, oh my God, they're saying exactly what I'm thinking. This feels so good. I feel so seen. And it's made the relationships that we've lost in the last year, it's made that transition easier because I want to be in community and in friendship with people that think with collective liberation for us all, that don't think that a certain group is better or deserves one thing or the other. We all deserve it. We're all in it. It's such an honor to be a part of.
I feel the same way. Absolutely.
This is Until All of Us Are Free, a year-long multimedia education project dedicated to Black liberation as collective liberation. And this has been an episode on Palestine Anti-Blackness, part of our month-long focus on Palestinian liberation and Black liberation. I am your host and creator of this project, Ijoma Onluo. Please be sure to go to untilwearefree.com so that you can see this episode's extensive notes and all of the other episodes and amazing information we have available there. That is also where you can become a supporter of this project that is currently self-funded. Your support helps me make the best content possible and keep it as accessible as possible. Thanks for joining me, and we will see you next time at Until All of Us Are Free.